Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMerced.dev, GrokOverflow.com, DevNursery.com, all your favorite, learning to be a developer hotspots. Now, today what I want to do is do another fun one. Like I just finished recording the video where I implemented a promise from scratch. And I thought like that was fun, like taking something that's already built into JavaScript and just replicating it to show how it works. So I said, why not do that with arrays? Because at the end of the day, really everything in JavaScript is just an object that's being implemented. So essentially, pretty much I would say like 90% of things that are built into JavaScript you could recreate. Like basically, like literally JavaScript could just exist with like objects, with just basic objects, loops, and if statements, and you can build everything from that. So let's build an array. Okay, let's build a whole, we'll call it a list because an array already exists, but we'll kind of do it like we did before. So first we'll create the class. And I'm not going to recreate every array method, but we'll create a few so you can see how it would work. Okay, so we'll start off with a class, and we're going to call it list. Okay, and essentially what we need is a constructor. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to allow you to pass as many things as you want to the constructor to construct your list. So I'm going to want those. Well, I'm going to try to avoid using built-in JavaScript arrays for the sake of, um, not really building an array from scratch. So I'm going to avoid allowing you can put an initial value. Let's do that for now. Because if we were to put many values, I guess we could use the arguments object. So let's do that. Okay, so constructor, and actually I just want to make sure that we can use I'm pretty sure you can use the arguments object in there, but what we're going to do is we'll just test that out. So we'll just say console.log, or just do this. Const my list equals a new list. Okay. And basically the first thing I'm going to want to do is just take for let item or arg of arguments, and then console log arg. Okay. Fine. I'll use const. There we go. And then let's just pass this like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because technically, arguments is not an array. It's a built-in object I built into JavaScript. So I'm technically not using an array. It's a custom iterable object, which is technically what we're building here. Okay. So if I run that, and I just run this file, node list.js. Okay, good. So I can use the argument as object. So we can use that to kind of build out the initial array. So essentially what's going to happen is that, like any array, we want to have a length property. So which should start at 0 because initially the length is 0. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to want to push all the values from the arguments object into this array. So essentially the way this would work, we would first want to create a method push that allows us to push things at the end of the array. So let's create that push method. And we'll just say the new value. Okay, and essentially what should happen is that this.length should be incremented. So we're going to add 1 because basically now the length is going to be 1 longer. And then what we're going to do is add a new value using that number as the index. So this dot, let's see here, this dot length, or actually we should do that the other way around. So first, what you do is you say this dot length is the index, and that's going to equal the value. So in the case it starts out at 0, so the first thing you push in will be item 0, and the second thing you push in will be 1, etc. Okay. So now when we do that, that'll work. Okay. So I can now push a value in there, So that's basically what I'm going to want to do. So I'll just say like this dot push, and we go push all the args. Okay, and then we'll create a method. Usually you could just use a square brackets, but again, this is our own custom thing. So I'm going to create a method called index, which will return the item at the index. Just say I, and it will return this I. Okay, so let's try that out. So if I create this new list with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and if I were the console.log my list dot index, and we'll say the thing at the 0 index, so should log 1. Let's see if that works so far. Oh, give me 5. Interesting. Let me think about that. Why did it give me 5? Okay. So let's log this not length. Did length actually like expand? No, list is still 1. So why? Because technically each time we do a push, we should be equaling the value. So this dot push would then this dot length equals value. So let's do it this way. It's console.log this after each. Okay, so list length 1, 0, 1. So it keeps changing the 0 value. So the 0 index, which is not what it should be doing because technically we're saying this dot length, the length continues to be 1. It's not adding the 1, so but it should because this dot length plus equals 1 should add 1. So why isn't it adding 1? Oh, because I'm assigning it 0 each time. That's the problem. This should be outside of the loop. There we go. See, I keep reassigning it to 0, and that's the problem. So now let's try it out. Okay, and that's the way it should look like. So you see, like, we're adding each thing once. There we go. And then technically, you could actually access the values the way you would normally. So technically, it would still work. So I should still be able to do console.log my list 0. And that should still access the 0 index because just the way objects work. Okay. So that works. So actually, I don't even need this index method, technically. Okay, I mean, if I wanted to re-implement that app method so we can use -1, that's a different story. But actually, let's bring that back and do that. We'll just say, like, if I is less than 0, we'll do one thing. We're going to return this dot return this at this dot length minus I, or plus I, because it's a negative number, theoretically in that situation. And otherwise, it's going to return this. So let's try that out. So like technically, if I do index dot index minus 1, it should give me 5 if I did that right. Yep, and there we go. Okay, good. Okay, so technically now I have that method and I can use the negative numbers kind of like in a Python or pretty much every other language. I can do that. So I have a, so right now so far I'm rebuilding the array, and see, notice it's just an object. Now the problem is looping. Okay, there's the built-in way to make like any object you create work with like this for of loop is you would have to implement a function called symbol.iterator, and you'd have to implement this function as a generator function. We're not going to do that. We're going to keep it real simple today. So we're going to create our own custom like loop function. Okay, and we're just going to take a callback. So it's going to work a lot like a for each method. So if you want to loop over the array, you pass in the callback. And essentially what it's going to do is it's going to create a normal standard for loop where we say let I equals 0, so it's at the beginning of the array. Then long as I is less than this dot length. We'll keep going, and then after each loop we'll add 1. Okay, and then technically we're going to receive the item. So const the item is going to equal this at the I index. And then we have the I. So then what we do is just take that callback. We run it, passing in the item and the index. Okay, cool. So now I've created a way to like loop over the array. So now I can be like my list dot loop and just say like item console.log item. And see, it loops over the item. Okay, so now I've created my own way to iterate over the thing. And using that, I can then now go implement things like map and push. So if I wanted to implement map, okay, I could do map. It'll be kind of hard to implement map without, well, I can do it. Okay, so map, we pass in the callback. And essentially what will happen is we will create a const new list, or list equals new list. This is going to be a new empty list. Okay. And then what's it going to do is we'll then loop. So we'll then do this dot loop item index. And then on each loop, we're going to say list dot push. And we're going to take the callback, pass it in the item and the index. So we're pushing in the result of that. And then after the end, we return the list. Okay, so let's try that out. Console.log, take my list.map, and we'll just say item index. And what I want to do is return item plus index. No, there's one more parentheses needed. There we go. Let's see here. So I should get like, 1, 3, 5, 7, so on forth. So let's see if that works. Okay, and that works. See, 0, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Okay, so see, I'm getting a list with all the proper, and I can continue building out all the different methods that exist in a traditional array out from there. So you could literally build your own, custom array-like object. In this case, what I did here with list. Okay, and it's for the most part working the same way. I mean, it's doing the same generic stuff. Again, anything that's going to be rawly built into JavaScript is going to have the benefit that it was probably implemented in C++ because generally, like the core JavaScript engines are written in C++. So they're going to probably have a tiny bit more optimization because the engine's built with them in mind. But the point is, like, raw JavaScript gives you the tools to build out all these things from scratch if you wanted to. Or if you had like a unique use case that you really need to create something custom. But oftentimes it's really, really nice to implement these data structures to help better understand how they work. So yeah, so you can see here, we basically reconstructed an array. And again, basically, if I wanted to kind of the only difference it would be if I implemented that symbol.iterator is that then it would work with like a for of loop, because essentially the symbol.iterator function is the thing that is a function you can add to an object that tells the for of loop how to determine which order to loop over things. But I'm gonna not go there now. I think I do have a video on symbol.iterator somewhere if you want to watch how that's implemented. But yeah. that would be the deal there. So essentially it would just be look like something like this, be like symbol dot iterator, and then you would just implement this function, and you would write the logic in there. It's a generator function, so basically you have to kind of like get used to like the things like next and all that stuff, which I'm not going to get into generators in this video. But yeah, see, not too bad, not too hard to implement like basically a custom array. Again, basic, and then that's generally how most arrays work or lists work in most languages. It really depends a lot on that length property. Having that length property allows you to determine like what all your other operations are. The only thing that would be kind of tricky to implement are going to be things like splice. Because it's spliced, then what happens? You have to go back and then you remove the one item, but then I have to go move all the other items over to a different key. Yeah, and then mutate the actual object. So creating that logic would probably be the most difficult, because you have to be like, oh, okay, I remove item 2, but now I got to move this over to here and then this over to here and update the length and do all that. That's probably the trickiest of all of them to implement that I can think of. Like map for each. All the callback methods should be pretty easy to implement, as you saw with map. Like once you have that loop, once you have the ability to loop, it's really just they're just different versions of different use cases for a loop. Yeah, most of the other methods should be pretty easy to implement. Splice would be the tricky one. I'd have to kind of think a little on like how you'd build that. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this. My name is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. Have a great day and enjoy.